welcome to the webinar, everyone. Today's webinar is hosted by Adobe, one of our strategic industry partners here at the American Public Human Services Association, or APHSA, as I will call it. And the Adobe team has pulled together a really great panel of experts on today's topic, which is strategies to increase digital literacy. I will properly introduce our panel in just a moment. Before we jump into discussion, quick introduction of me. I'm the Assistant Director of Process Innovation here at APHSA. And my team here focuses on aspects of what we refer to as process innovation, which is really an umbrella term we use to bridge technology, data, and customer experience under one team and one direction within the organization. So we work with members, collaborators, customers, people with lived experience, and basically like APHSA's full network to explore and improve how human services are designed and delivered. So digital literacy falls squarely within our focus as a team, and that's why I'm so excited to have the opportunity to moderate today's discussion. So let's go to the next slide, please. Quick information about APHSA in case you aren't familiar. We are the membership association that represents state and local human services agencies across the country. When I say that, I mean we engage various different groupings of our membership to generate practical solutions that work for people and communities in service of our vision. And our vision is thriving communities built on human potential. So we can go to the next slide with a quick snippet of our vision and our mission. And our mission, of course, is to influence policy, build capacity, and connect leaders across human services to accelerate learning and co-create solutions that advance the well-being of individuals, of families, and of communities. So next slide, just a quick plug for our final conference of the year. This is our NSDTA conference, the National Trainers Group, Staff Development and Trainers. So speaking of convening members, this one is later this month, October 22nd to 25th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And you can check out our website for more information or to register for that. But without further ado, some final housekeeping things. Let's see. So one thing during the webinar, I believe the chat feature is fully disabled. So if you have comments, questions, really anything you want us as hosts or panelists to see from you, please use the question and answer tab. There's a panel at the bottom, and if your Zoom screen is minimized a little bit, it might be under the More button. So I hope everyone's able to find that, because we will have time for questions throughout and during and at the end. The webinar is being recorded, and it'll be shared with all registrants in the coming days. And this conversation is really going to be very much an open dialogue. So if you have a question during the conversation itself, please feel free to add it, and I'll do my best to weave it into that discussion. And then we'll also reserve some time at the end for simply audience Q&A. Okay, sounds good. Now for those panelist introductions I promised. Next slide. So here with us today, I'll go a little out of order. We have Megan from Adobe, and she is the Director of Health and Human Services there, bringing over a decade of public sector background across public policy, community organizing, health advocacy, all kind of in service of helping health and human services agencies modernize while keeping client outcomes central to their focus. And in her current role, Megan focuses on helping her clients thrive in ever-changing digital landscapes, and also helps her clients, which are human services agencies, engage with their own clients and harness data to improve outcomes. So very relevant to today's topic. Thanks for being here, Megan. We also have with us James or Jim Weaver, who is currently the Secretary and State Chief Information Officer for North Carolina Department of Information Technology. He joined that agency in 2021 with over 30 years of leadership and management experience in IT. Of relevance, he leads strategic IT planning and procurement and delivery of IT services, as well as cybersecurity. So quite a few things that we'll be touching on in today's conversation. And he's had experience with various states, including Pennsylvania and Washington. So if you don't mind, James or Jim, we'll draw on a lot of that experience as well as your current role. And then finally relevant, Jim is an active member of the U.S. Armed Forces and previously served in the Army National Guard in Washington and Pennsylvania and currently in North Carolina. So thank you for your breadth of experience and bringing it to the conversation. And finally, our last panelist I'll introduce is Wade Horn, Managing Director and Lead Client Service Partner for North Carolina and South Carolina from Deloitte. So in his current role, Dr. Wade Horn is responsible for driving service excellence and managing risk, developing account leaders and his team, and delivering strong financial performance. Before Deloitte, he worked as the Assistant Secretary for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and also served as Commissioner for Children, Youth, and Families, and Chief of the Children's Bureau. There are also quite a few different groups that Dr. Wade sits in on. So invite you to share your expertise from those areas as well. And also relevant, he is the co-founder and first president of the National Fatherhood Initiative and has been an adjunct faculty at Georgetown University's Public Policy Institute. So thank you very much for being here. So before I offer some questions to our panelists, I'll set the stage of what we mean when we're talking about digital literacy in today's conversation. So next slide, please. Okay, so a few things to ground us for today. I'd invite us to think about digital equity and opportunities to operationalize equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging within the context of digital literacy. So today's conversation is really going to span various vantage points on digital literacy, from the customer level and how digital literacy impacts that customer experience, from the agency level and how digital literacy in internal operations and in staff skill sets impacts service delivery, and at the systematic level, considering how cultural and societal realities like demographic disparities or human biases and externalities like, say, pandemics or rapid AI advancements inform our approach to digital equity in our human services sector. So on the screen here, just a few statistics kind of across all of these vantage points. On the systematic front, broadband access is one really important indicator of digital equity, and that's something I know James Weaver brings a lot of insight into. And the data shows clearly that rural areas have much less broadband access than urban areas. Meanwhile, digital literacy isn't really ubiquitous. We can't expect that all adults have high digital literacy skill sets, even though most people rely on digital methods to get information about public services. So a bit of a conundrum there that we should think through in our challenges. And with these examples and stage setting, I think we are ready to hop into our dialogue. So let's go ahead and pull the slides now. And we're actually going to start the conversation by inviting our attendees in with a poll. So go ahead and launch that poll, please. Okay, so a poll should have just popped up on your screen asking about your perspective on priorities. So from your perspective, which initiatives should be prioritized to most effectively address the digital divide? just to kind of baseline our conversation and what you all think is important. The options include expanding access to affordable high-speed internet, providing digital skills and training programs, ensuring accessibility of digital government services, collaborating with community organizations, or something else. Give everyone just a minute, maybe a couple seconds more. Okay, how are we doing? Can we close the poll? Okay. So that broadband access is really floating to the top here. Before I jump into my first formal question, any Megan, Jim, or Wade, quick reflections on these results?
I'll go ahead and start. Actually, they probably are what the order I would have put them in. Connectivity and reliable connectivity is extremely important. We can't talk about being in a digital world if we are leaving residents and citizens behind and not on the digital highway. I know we're going to talk later about training and literacy programs around the digital area. You know, and then thirdly, around digital government services, we are too much online. We now need to start changing the conversation, switch the paradigm over to the focus from a citizen's perspective. I know citizen-centric, we use all these buzzwords over the last 20 years, but we're not there yet. And we have more work to do.
And I think the reality is if you had a choice that said all of the above, 100% of the people would have said all of the above. Because all of that is important. I think that the ordering it does reflect, as Jim noted, I think an order that makes sense to me. If you don't have broadband access, then the rest of it doesn't matter, right? But the reality is it's kind of all of the above. We need to be doing all of it at the same time if we're going to really maximize the ability to use digital services in the public square.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think just the statistics you showed demonstrate really the interconnectedness of all of these issues. And so it's all of the above, like Wade said. And it's really about having a holistic solution that not only builds these digital accessible means of interacting, but also ensures that people can use them, right? So I think it'll be an issue that continues to evolve.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect lead in, though, to the first question, which is for all of you. And just a warm up, round robin. I'll start with you, Megan, actually. So just let's hear a little bit about your perspective on digital literacy and how it shows up in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So digital equity more broadly is a central theme in all of the work that I do, particularly as we work towards priorities around enhancing customer experience or enabling digital government. And so as we work with agencies to reimagine digital experiences, we're always thinking about ways to ensure that their customers, regardless of digital literacy, their accessibility needs, the language that they speak, or the device that they are relying on to access online services, that they each have an equal opportunity to access that information or services from anywhere at any time. And if you think about how it often works today, when people are searching for help, a lot of times we're relying on them to not only know what service that they're looking for, that it exists at all, but also what channel they can use to interact with government, whether that's a call center or needing to walk into an office, perhaps printing and mailing a form, and what agency or department administers that service in the first place. And so, in other words, this is a really government-centric experience. And so as we think about digital equity, we're really working with agencies to flip that paradigm on its head. And that means putting the individual at the center of the experience. And so in our work, we do this through a strategy that we call experience-driven government. This includes being able to reach residents on their preferred channel, enabling methods of self-service, delivering content on any device or connection. So that could mean, low bandwidth users, and also offering more than just an automated translation service, but really being able to speak to people in a language that they'll understand, meeting them where they are. And so it's, again, just not about standing up these digital channels in our work, but it's about designing for those unique needs of each and every customer that HHS agencies serve. And then maybe most importantly, being able to use data to gain visibility into what's working, and being able to see that these experiences are effective for each audience that you serve. So equity is really at the heart of experience-driven government and everything that I do.
And how about for you, Wade and Jim? How does digital equity or digital literacy show up in your day-to-day?
Well, when I think about this, I think about two groups. The first group I'm tempted to say I'm part of, they're kind of the legacy users, the old fogies, if you will, who didn't grow up in a digital world. When we talked about digits when I was a kid, we talked about fingers. I had no idea what digital literacy meant. And then there's the digital native users. Again, they could be workers, they could be beneficiaries, but they've grown up in a digital world. It's just like second nature to them. And so there's this dual challenge that we have, which is how do we bring the legacy users into the digital world in an effective way that makes them feel comfortable? At the same time, how do we work with the native users and meet their expectations? Because they expect this all to be online. They expect it to be digital services. They expect an Amazon type experience from government. These are two different needs, and bridging the gap between those two, building systems that can be responsive to the needs of both the legacy users and the digital natives. It's a real challenge for government.
Would you
Well,
add?
I think this, yeah, I'll go. I think this is what happens when I let Wade go first. So I'm, a lot of my background is from the human services days in my career, and it's been one of the most rewarding times of my career was working in human services. I can recall back to Wade's point, where as we were implementing some new systems enhancements, our more seasoned workers at our county assistance offices were complaining about they had to now use a mouse. They were so used to doing green screen stuff and being able to, they could type and look at you and talk and bam, 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 and go through 100% accuracy. We had a younger workforce that complained about having to use a mouse because they wanted to swipe the screen and touch the screen and do everything in that manner as well. And I think that's part of our challenge, especially at government right now, is there's 5 generations of a workforce now in play. Government doesn't get the ability to market and brand and focus in on a particular constituent like commercial enterprises have. And so we have to try to be all inclusive, and sometimes that gets in the way of progress, as we all know. When we look here, specifically in North Carolina, it's really interesting and we're very much data driven on our broadband program. It's very interesting to start looking at the county's demographics. When we start looking at racial information, as we look at gender information, the problems really change very much as far as how we're able to get people connected, what their needs are. And I'm sorry, and I'm one of the users like Wade here. While that my smartphone is a convenience item, it gives me that instant gratification, the here and now moment. As soon as I can get onto the bigger screen, I'm doing that because I guess I'm called a legacy user. Is that what you refer to us as, Wade?
That works if you like it for yourself. I'm gonna stick with you for a minute for our next question, Jim. So given that one of your expertise areas is cybersecurity, curious how you approach digital government initiatives to ensure both efficiency and accessibility, of course, but and particularly for folks who may not be tech savvy, while balancing security and privacy considerations.
Yeah, so let me talk about it from a resident perspective here in North Carolina. So as Governor Cooper launched his broadband program, money was set aside or identified, ARPA funds in particular at the moment. $50 million was established for our Office of Digital Equity Literacy engagement opportunities. As part of that was training. And as part of that training is around cyber security, because the last thing we want to do is get people connected to the digital highway for them to turn around and become victims of nefarious actors that are out there. We all know that the Nigerian prince is not giving away his gold, but yet people still click on that. And so we just got to continue that security awareness, that security training, and putting at the forefront. And thank you for asking the question, since it is October and it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. But every month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, or it should be. What we really are looking at, and we're working with our nonprofit partners here in North Carolina, in particular, Cramden and E2D, which is based in Charlotte. Cramden's outside of Durham, but they're focused on providing refurbished equipment and then also providing these essential training elements to individuals who are receiving this equipment. So they are getting the full spectrum and being brought up to speed on connecting and being part of the digital highway.
Awesome. Megan or Wade, I know cybersecurity is not squarely within your area, but if you have any additional thoughts you want to add around just protecting clients' information, and making sure that staff too are safe, I invite you in on this question before we move on.
Yeah, a few things on what Jim said. I think one, the cybersecurity piece is important, not only to prevent your clients from becoming victims and really just preparing them to stay safe in a digital world, but that also builds trust within your service delivery. And so we have to be thinking about cybersecurity as we move interactions online. And in a digital first world, that doesn't mean digital only. Right. So we've talked a lot about legacy users or people's preferences for the method in which they communicate with government. But really taking those legacy users, is this the term we've adopted, and moving them online, they need to have that trust, or that won't happen. You can't force the shift. And I think there have been some interesting findings when we think about age, even those who are digital natives. That doesn't mean that they're truly fluent across, all digital literacy issues. And so things like cybersecurity may be something that we need to bring to the forefront. But it's all about trying to fill in those gaps within the specific needs of each population.
Yeah, when I first went online, my kids had already been online for years, and now I'm getting with it. And I remember they would like caution me, don't click on everything. Like, just don't just says there, don't click on it. Like, why not? Why not? It says, it seemed interesting. No, don't click on that. And just this morning, coincidentally, I got something from a bank. I wouldn't say where I have a bank account. They had one of those things, did you do this charge? It looked like my bank. Everything looked the same. It had a chart that obviously wasn't and I looked at it and I said, there's something odd about this. I mean, it's just something that doesn't seem right, even though we're used to those now. It was a text message, just like we get those text messages, yes or no, did you do this purchase? So I called the bank and I said, they said, oh, no. That's phishing. That's thank you for not clicking on that. I mean, the bad guys are getting so sophisticated in this area that we have to constantly be educating people about what to do, what not to do, and how to report things that or check out things before you click on it. Because as Jim said, there's tremendous good that comes through digital services, but there's also somebody out there someplace that maybe they've given up on selling you $70 million in Nigerian gold or whatever it is, but they want to sell you something, and it's probably not good for you.
And just to add on to that, the human brain is so conditioned to seeing things a specific way, and so we were given as an example two URLs. And I don't, and it was Citibank.com, and I'm not picking on Citibank when I say this. One of them was bad, and you had to figure that out from just looking at it. And one of the URLs had the one letter A had the Cyrillic tail on it. But I tell you what, you stared at that and you stared at that, and what you saw was Citibank.com. That's what your brain kept saying very clearly. So, and then the other one is QR codes. The rise in use of QR codes, especially coming out of COVID, is a threat actor's best way right now of delivering a lot of malicious content and doing some really bad things as well. And so we're seeing right now an uptick, especially targeting human services entities, of leveraging QR codes in an email message that basically says, scan our code. Well, why do that if you're sending an email message and there's a QR code? But again, going back to Wade's comment, it looked wrong. It doesn't feel right. It's probably not right. But we still have people who fall victim to that.
And to bring us back to the digital equity conversation, these protections, these trainings, this information on how to be a safe digital user is really like just the prerequisite for additional accessibility through digital means. So either sticking with the cybersecurity front or branching more out into accessibility broadly, I'm actually going to go back to Wade first for the next question. Having spent time in government and now on the industry side of things, can you share any like noteworthy trends, best practice type things you've seen from government agencies, both either from your direct experience or from your client experience? How are governments in human services leveraging good practices around digital equity to inform their own initiatives and policies?
Sure. So I'm gonna start answering that question by saying 2 strategies that don't work. Okay.
Awesome.
The first is the if you build it, they will come philosophy. So just because a bunch of smart people get together and figure out how to prevent to implement some kind of digital service doesn't mean that people are going to show up or be able to use it. And the second one is sort of related to it, which is assuming that you can take something out of a box, implement it, and it's going to work just fine. That one of the things that both industry and government has discovered is that you really have to think in human-centered design principles as you are creating and designing digital services. And so, and what that means is that you're taking into account the preferences, expectations of the user, so that as opposed to forcing a certain kind of digital service experience onto everybody as if that's going to work. So I think that both government and industry have something to learn from each other. And when it comes to this, Jim mentioned earlier that industry has the sort of, in some ways, the private sector is able to sort of target specific demographics with different kinds of digital services. And while government can do that, in general, it also has to be at the exact same time accessible to everybody, not just to this demographic or that demographic. And how one does that in a way that is inviting to the broad range of groups that interact with digital services is a real challenge. But the solution is not to think you're smarter than everybody else and you know the answer. The solution is to really do a lot of advanced work with the potential users, getting their input as you design your digital services.
And I would add it's knowing that up front, but also staying in touch with those users. So continuously measuring both qualitatively and quantitatively, looking at the data because things change rapidly. And I think that the only way to stay up to date with those changing needs is to have that iterative approach where you're constantly checking your assumptions and checking back in with the people that you're ultimately designing these services for.
Yeah, I would just add too, and again, community stakeholder engagement's huge. Staying in connection with them, because a lot of times it's your centers of influence within the community that can help make or break some of these government offerings, if you will, to try to go ahead and engage residents a little bit differently than what they're used to. Unfortunately, there's still, in some cases, distrust of government. And so, again, as you're working with churches, as you're working with community centers, creating those anchors of institution within those communities, community navigators, it's truly important to get that feedback and see what is working, what is not working. But I think the important thing here is don't be afraid to fail. You're not going to get it right the first time, and it's going to take multiple iterations, but build upon those successes to get to a product that is of high quality.
I think sticking with this question for another minute, Megan, earlier you mentioned language access or language justice. I forget how you phrased it, but I hear, we need to make digital, government services broadly accessible to literally everyone in the country because they're available to everyone who's a citizen of our countries, of our communities. And so within that, recognizing the diversity of our populations that we serve, in some cases we'll have a priority population because we've noticed that a certain group or area or region has been hard to reach, potentially under-enrolled in a certain program, may have less awareness of the programs offered than other groups. So thinking about these populations, which really vary state to state, community to community, otherwise marginalized individuals or families like those who are not native English speakers, let's reflect on those accessibility points and how we balance possibly using data to prioritize such populations while holding that general, we must provide equitable services to all. Megan, do you want to jump in with any comments on that front?
Yeah, sure. That is a big question, touching on a lot of points. I think one, I want to echo again what Jim said about working with community partners. So I think that in order to scale, especially as most government agencies are suffering from staffing shortages and hiring issues, we have to use our network to reach the people that we're trying to serve. I think there's also a great opportunity to be more proactive in terms of making that connection. A lot of it today is the build it and they will come, or if they really need this service, they'll ask for it. And we're seeing, sometimes the issue is purely awareness. And so again, your community partners can help with that. But when it comes to being proactive, there's a lot of opportunity, whether it's through social media advertising, which is a much lighter lift across languages, or partnering with your other sister agencies to try to expand that reach. But it definitely, it's a big lift. And I understand why when people look at, here we have a vast majority of the people we serve, this is how we're going to design the initial experience. From a technology standpoint, it really comes to creating a platform that can let you continue to develop those experiences in an iterative fashion, and not needing to stand up a bunch of silos. So.
Wade or Jim, do you have any reflections on how we hold both diversity and equity in our digital initiatives?
Yeah, let me jump in there first, Wade. When I look at North Carolina specifically, going off the 2020 census numbers, the largest racial subdivision growth area was the Latino community. Very significant growth rate here from 2010 to 2020 in North Carolina, and it's going to continue to grow at that rate as well. The other interesting part of it is, though, that the largest, when we look at it from an age demographic perspective, the largest growth spurt was age 65 and older as well. So as we talk about diversity here and equity, we have to take a look at it. We're getting older. We have this influx of different racial subdivisions coming into our communities. And then how do we go ahead and engage a lot differently? And again, that's where I go back to technology can solve some of this. I can remember in the early days of my human services career, as we were looking at the different languages we had to support through LEP programs, as an example. And, Chinese, I think there was 8 different dialects of Chinese. And depending upon who you were interacting with, you could be totally wrong and talking foreign music to them, if you will, so to speak. And that's what we have to be careful with technology, because even if you look at some of the awesomeness that ChatGPT and some of the AI tools can bring as well, you still may not be getting the translations right to be able to interact appropriately with the individual you're trying to, whether it's on the other end of a call or whether it's a face-to-face conversation or even online. But we also got to just be cognizant of the fact we have this widening age of who we're trying to service, and we do have this influx of a younger generation as well, and how they engage. So I go back to that community grassroots. It's so vital to the success of these programs that we're trying to get delivered, because at the end of the day, local government's the one that most people see in action on a day-to-day basis. It picks up their trash, it provides their water, it's their sewage, those kind of things. They don't necessarily see state government in action day after day after day as well. So really working a lot with our local community partners is so critical for the success of some of these programs.
The only thing I would add, all those are terrific points, Jim, is sometimes inequity is hidden. And I'm a psychologist by training, and one of the truisms in psychology is you can't fix a problem until you know what the problem is. And so inequities are hidden. It's hard to address them because you don't know they're there. That seems obvious and intuitive. One of the things that exposed the digital divide was the pandemic. And because it was kind of like we imposed, for good reasons, a sort of one size fits all on communities across America. Stay at home, don't go out, don't send your kids to school, all in the, all for very good reasons. But what that exposed was a lot of hidden that may not have been obvious. So the rural-urban divide, underserved communities, and that some had much greater access to mobile devices and digital services, and could deal with that kind of imposed self-isolation. So as horrible as the pandemic was, and I would never say that anything good about the pandemic, one thing that came out of that was a greater recognition of this digital divide. And Jim has done an amazing job here in the state of North Carolina in addressing that through expanding access to broadband. I dare say without the pandemic, and as brilliant as Jim is, we might not be in the same place today if it weren't for the pandemic, because it exposed that digital divide.
Completely agree. I think one thing you just reminded me of are excellent points. There's still significant work just to get experiences up to code for the policies that already were in place before we started thinking about the digital divide. And so I would encourage leaders to not be intimidated or let that prevent them from beginning the process or getting things digital, because there's so much work to be done. But if we are right now imagining what the future could look like, and it's going to take those individual steps. And Wade, to your point about not being able to solve the problem until you've really seen it or identified it, we can also rely on data and analytics to uncover problems that we did not know existed. And so we're working with clients now to break down customer journeys across various audience segments, looking at anomalies, understanding if your website is not performing as well, maybe for Spanish speakers, seeing where that process breaks down, and then tying it back into human-centered design that helps you understand those moments that matter most. And so we know, digital can save money, it can save time, it can automate a lot. And so then you start redirecting some of those resources to spend a little bit more time on those use cases that might take a little bit more effort.
Yeah, and just somewhat related to this, but a little bit of talking about technology, just came back from our National Association's annual meeting. We were talking about generative AI, and we're going down through our various state frameworks of what we're focused on and different things, and bias and accountability and security and auditability, and I can go on and on and was talking about training and some of the training programs we're looking to do for employees and for program managers, for senior staff levels, et cetera, et cetera. And my colleague from Minnesota looked at me and said, well, what are you doing for the community? And I sat back and said, darn good question. Didn't think about that one, to be honest. But he was 100% correct. It's how are we going to go ahead and educate the community as well on some of these things? So again, going back to not to beat the horse as much as I have been there, but really get involved with our local leaders out in those communities to make these things successful.
Yeah, so before we went down this path, which is perfect because one of my next questions was for you, Megan, but I'll invite you all to respond here because I was curious about the realized any potential impacts you've seen from initiatives that are around improving digital literacy or closing the digital divide so far. I know we're talking, like, James, you took us a little bit down a future hypothetical route around AI, but looking back to, we've had tech disruptions before, and we've implemented interventions to address them for our customers, for our staff in the past. So how have those positioned us to do this again and continue to close the digital divide?
Sure. I think that one was for me. I think to your initial question, just on the potential impact of these initiatives, I think we all recognize here, and I'm probably preaching to the choir in the audience, that the opportunities are vast, both for individuals, for employers, and for the government. We know that digital literacy is crucial to thriving in today's society that really requires a certain level of familiarity and skill when it comes to computers and other technologies. And we're also seeing that there's a strong demand for digital skills in virtually every single industry and occupation. And that includes entry-level or frontline positions. And so when we can improve digital literacy, we know that those skills translate to better employment opportunities, to improved access to resources, not just government resources, but the way that we all interact online today. Really, it's about greater agency. And there have even been studies about digital literacy and the tie into better health outcomes. So there's so much to gain here. Especially for underserved communities and those that our HHS partners on the phone serve. Underserved communities and underemployed individuals face the most significant barriers when it comes to gaining access to reskilling or upskilling opportunities. And sometimes that's due to the cost of classes, maybe it's inflexible work hours, and they often have employers who are less likely to invest in filling that gap. So I think that that's really where the call for government to step in with these initiatives comes from. It really aligns so well with the mission of especially health and human services agencies. And on the employer side, including government as an employer, this is going to create a larger pool of candidates, means more opportunity for internal movement. And, I know that Jim loves cybersecurity, as do we all, but that means, you have the added benefit of employees who are more equipped to, take on, phishing attempts and know how to really safely go online. For a realized example, an example of a state who really recognizes the potential for these initiatives. Adobe recently partnered with the state of Hawaii to deploy an online platform that's called Skill Finder. Skill Finder was created for the purpose of reskilling and upskilling and really closing that digital literacy gap. So it's a free platform. It's live today. If you're a resident of Hawaii, you can actually go to the Skill Finder platform and access over 3,000 free courses. And they're all focused on micro learning, short-term credentialing, self-pacing. So it's really trying to make some of those upskilling opportunities available to all. And so there's skills, everything from, how to FaceTime or how to upload a document to, getting certified within a technology, or maybe it's project management. And so that's something that's super exciting to me, and something that we're already seeing in Hawaii. I think the last count was over 80,000 course enrollments. And so I'm excited to see some of the impact from that, but they're doing some really cool work.
Listening to
Awesome.
Megan.
Oh, yeah. Go. Yeah. You want me to go, Wade, or you want to go?
Go ahead, Jim. I'll follow
Okay.
you. I always
Thank you,
follow
sir.
you.
Only if that was so true, Wade. No, what I want to go with is we're here talking about the digital divide, and I think that's a misnomer at the end of the day. I love the term digital continuum. The divide, saying digital divide implies that we can fix it and fix it permanently, and I don't believe that is the case. I believe that we're going to be continuously moving along and having to bring others to the forefront as best possible. We look at the pace of change in technology. There was a time, Wade and I can remember the good old 9.6, 19.2 modem. We thought that was the best thing since sliced bread and butter popcorn, and now we can laugh about it. But 3 meg DSL at one time used to be, the bomb, so to speak. We're talking about gig symmetrical and whatever that might be down the road. So connectivity is going to be a major area. I can tell you here in North Carolina right now, we're looking to get our underserved areas to at least 100 down, 20 up. That is not super fast. It's better than 25.3, which is what the FCC has put their hat on. We're looking at, but we really would love to get a gig symmetrical or faster as we move forward. But we know that in some areas that's just not going to be possible. We can't get fiber everywhere in the state of North Carolina. We got mountains, we got different things that are going to be geographical challenges for us. So leveraging, whether it's fixed wireless, low Earth orbiting satellites, we're going to have to bring all that together and try to do the best we can to keep our residents on the digital highway. The next piece of this is affordability. It's great if we run fiber to someone's house. It does no good if we can't get them connected. So the affordable connectivity program that exists right now is so critical for our success here in North Carolina. We have over 850,000 households already registered for that program, for getting the $30 subsidy or offset on their internet bill, if you will. And many of our providers here in North Carolina are offering quality internet at that $30 price. So the net result is eventually free. That's just so critical for the success. We talked about the education and the training programs, but one of the other things, and Megan was starting to go there a little bit, I believe, is the importance now for us to start taking a look at all these tools that we're using in industry and pushing them down and making them available, not at the college level, at the high school level. We have a number of kids now coming out that aren't aspiring to go to college. They're looking for internships, apprenticeship programs. And if they know how to make use of the tools that we're leveraging today in private public sector, they're very viable candidates. And even in the cyber world, I love my chief risk officer made the comment yesterday. We have a lot of people who are trained, but what they're trained on and what the needs are misaligned. And the only way to start doing this is to start bringing these things together a little bit differently. And I think the crux of that's going to be at our high school level. Adobe I know Adobe tools are leveraged in one of our school districts. I won't mention who, but the students there are learning how to do multimedia type stuff, leveraging the Adobe product set, from being anchor men and women at a news station kind of setup, to doing podcasts, to doing all kinds of cool things across the digital media. The more our high school kids can get accustomed in using these tools, it's going to be a benefit not only for us as employers, but also I'll put my cyber hat back on since October. It'll help us secure the homes a lot better too. Mr. Wade.
I want to just quickly, Wade, we'll hear from you, but encourage, if any attendees have questions that they want to start dropping in, I'll be moderating the chat just a little bit. I have one more question after Wade's response to this too.
Yeah, so in listening to both Megan and Jim, it reminds me that a lesson we seem to have to constantly relearn is that change is hard. It's not easy. And whether you're talking about change management at the individual level, community level, organizational level, change is hard. I'm a psychologist, and one truism in psychology is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. My father used to say, Wade, when I was doing therapy, he'd say, Wade, I understand why you need 2 sessions. The first session is they tell you the problem, and the second session is you tell them the solution. Why do you have to do 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions? It's because change is uncomfortable. And so we have to bring people along. Jim was talking about green screens earlier. I remember we had just implemented, we mentioned the state, a brand new system for an integrated eligibility system. And this particular state had chosen to migrate, rather than all the data at once, they would migrate data from one system to the other when a case came up for renewal. So they had 2 screens. One was the green screen, and one was this really cool, drop down, great, cool looking screen. And I said, searching for a compliment, I said to the worker, I said, boy, you must really love this new screen. He said, I hate it. I said, what? He goes, I hate it. He goes, I know all these 3-digit codes by heart. I know exactly. Now I got to jump around this thing. And now eventually that person grew to like this, but we had not done enough change management up front to help them understand, how to adjust to this new environment that they're working in. And so whenever we're talking about new tools or new ways of providing digital services, we have to always keep in mind that there are going to be people who will say, including me, by the way, I think I'm the last person in the world who stopped going physically to a bank to deposit a check. Everybody else, my wife, my kids, just take a picture of it and deposit. I say, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. Change is hard, and we have to bring people.
Okay, I have a question that fits right in with that, actually. When we're talking about change for our own workforce, Megan, you kind of touched on some of the impacts of the initiatives that can stand up to close digital divides or to address the digital continuum, which, Jim, I love that term. I'm actually going to steal it, I think, moving forward. But what's the impact look like for government staff? So if we're saving time, we're automating more, and we're spending more time on customer use cases, potentially more time in communities, what do you think that's going to look like at agencies?
I guess I'll jump on that one first, since so here in North Carolina, right now today, the state workforce, we're seeing a 23% vacancy rate across the agencies. Secretary Kinsley, my colleague for Health and Human Services, when you get into some of his facilities, that number is probably up over 30% in some cases. IT, I'm sitting at 11%. Still not ideal, but we're probably one of the more stable agencies, if you will, from that aspect. It's very difficult for us to recruit. We have the Research Triangle sitting in our backyard. We have a number of significant IT vendors sitting in our backyard here in the Raleigh-Charlotte area. So it's hard for us to get that workforce to come in. The other thing we have as well is we're information technology. A lot of us can be remote. So right now today, although the number's starting to drop down a little bit lower as we go, but it's 64% of the agency right now. My agency is full-time remote work. Interestingly enough, as we're seeing, our seasoned workers are very much want to continue doing full-time remote. Our younger workers are coming in looking for a hybrid experience. And it's an interesting scenario to have here. Most recently, we had a number of our interns, 16 of them in particular, as they were telling us about how I jokingly call it how they spent their summer. They were really doing some really cool stuff across the board. Every one of them talked about how they wish they could have had more time to interact with their colleagues face to face, to be involved. They really enjoyed the call to duty. They enjoy going out. One of our functional areas did a Habitat for Humanity. Another one had done a food bank type exercise. We do a lot of computer refurbishing as well. We're very fortunate with Carolina. We get 4 approved days to do community service. Governor Cooper is very big on community service. And they talked about how they got to know their teammates and get engaged. And my workforce right now is probably from 20 years old to 82 years old. And that's even on one team. And it's interesting, as the younger part of that workforce said, yeah, we would love to come in more and work with our teammates. They're looking for that mentoring, they're looking for that human interaction. And then, of course, our seasoned workers are more like, we're very content working from home and very appreciative of that benefit and capability that we have. So it's going to be interesting there. But what I'm going with this is technology is going to continue to enhance and complement what our workforce does. As I tell my staff, AI is not going to replace you. What's going to replace you is people who know how to use AI. And so we're constantly in a world that we need to be educated in. There's not a point, if you're an IT professional, that you can sit there and say, I know everything I need to know and I'm going to be great at my job. We have to continuously learn. In my agency, we have a very significant training budget. In fact, with this upcoming year that we're in for employee evaluations, 36 hours of professional development is one of the requirements. We want to see what is it that you're doing and accounting for, because again, we're moving at such a rapid pace of change. We can't afford to have anybody get left behind and become irrelevant. So that's kind of where we're looking at here. And of course, as we look at a remote workforce, they do have challenges with broadband connectivity at times. And sometimes it is painful. Fortunately, kids are back in school for the most part, not sitting at home learning. I couldn't imagine what it was like with two kids trying to do schoolwork and mom and dad working from home at the same time. Just was unbearable. And I remember my time in Washington, one of my colleagues, I jokingly said that she was in the Star Trek transporter beam. That's how she came across when we were on a Teams call or Zooms call or whatever the case may be. It was quite funny. The other thing I would just throw out here too, just as a word of caution, is we didn't really talk a lot about individuals with disabilities. What I came to appreciate during my time in Washington and having Microsoft in my backyard, I had a kitchen cabinet, I guess is the best way of putting it, of individuals who represented different areas of disabilities. And it really brought home to me when we were on a Zoom call one day, and as I was engaging with him after that, he was very frustrated because we referenced documents on the screen that he couldn't see. Right now, he had his adaptive tools that could do certain things, but he had to know it was there to begin with. The next thing was, because he had a limited visual capability, he was getting sensory overload from all the chat messages coming in, boom, 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 and trying to listen to a speaker, and how all that started overlapping each other. And it was a horrible experience for him at the end of the day. Now, I know things have gotten much better, but I think we lose sight of some of those things when we just go right into a discussion. Oh yeah, on the screen, look here at paragraph 3. And we lose sight of the fact of maybe not everybody has the ability to go look at paragraph 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't want to skip over this very important topic, but we only have 1 minute left.
Oh, wow.
So I think we're going to close with that final poll. And thank you all for your very important perspectives on this topic. Megan, with the final poll launching here and goodbyes to our attendees, do you want to share a little bit from the customer and client experience? We'll bring up that final slide.
Yeah, first, I just want to say thank you, Jess, and thank you, Wade and Jim, for this conversation. It doesn't end here. This is also a continuum, I think. And thanks for everybody for joining. There are 2 resources I just wanted to make available. If you guys are interested in learning more, we did have an article that expands on this topic within Policy and Practice. There was a QR code here and I removed it since it's Cybersecurity Month at Jim's request. But you can access that there. And then we also have what we call a digital equity maturity quiz. It only takes about 6 minutes, but it's a good way for you to start thinking about how you're currently delivering experiences and where there might be some opportunities. So would love to continue the conversation with all the panelists and everyone online. So thank you again.
Yes, thank you. And as a reminder, you'll get the recording and you'll get these links from us as well. So all of that, look forward to it in your inbox. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.